off we go. I have a couple of questions to start with, but if anyone here has questions, feel free to throw into the chat. Yeah, I'd love to just start off with just hearing more about this partnership. You've said that it's already been here for about five-ish years, 7-ish years. So yeah, please just like do a quick intro on this partnership. What has it looked like? What have y'all done together? And how have students been involved?
Okay, so I'm fairly certain, I can't remember exactly how we got connected, but I think it was through CCE that we originally got connected, Dr. Parkin and I. And so at our organization, we host an annual public safety survey to really measure communities' perceptions of safety and how they feel. And we've done it in different ways over the years, but most recently we've had a pretty lengthy survey where we asked folks, and I'll talk a little bit about how it shifted during the pandemic, but where we asked folks, you know, their perceptions of safety within the neighborhood, how they feel, and kind of also just different things on how they feel about who they feel the most safe with. And so one of the hardest parts is like, as we continue to look in different ways to engage our community, we do multilingual surveys in Chinese and Vietnamese and English. We would do it paper form online so that we make sure it's accessible to all of the residents and businesses, business employees and business owners, and then the larger community within the CID. As you can guess, some people have access to technology and are able to do that. Some folks are not, you know, we have a lot of seniors that live in the neighborhood. And so we wanted to make sure that we were really broad within doing that. And so, but one of the hardest parts is like, how do we take that information? And like, I'm not a statistician, and we also don't have those resources within our organization to really take that information and make it into something that makes sense and something that we can actually use to advocate for more funding or more resources for the CID, the Chinatown ID, for those of you that are not from Seattle. So, so we got connected with Dr. Parkin, and so I think we partnered our first year during winter quarter, I want to say, and maybe I'll let you talk a little bit about how your class is structured. And how we did that.
Yeah, definitely. And I can give maybe a little bit background too about how we got connected. And you know, the Center for Community Engagement is extremely involved in the community around Seattle, which is fantastic. It gives students and professors the ability to do real world service learning that we wouldn't have without those types of connections. And so through the center, I actually worked on a public safety grant with Yesler Terrace, which is a community just south of campus. And then through that work, then the center connected Jamie and I with my methods and stats class initially. I believe the first couple years, the methods class was working on putting the data in for analysis, and the stats class was working on doing the analysis. And so in most programs, you're going to have like a research methods class and a stats class. And so we were able to split that up, where the methods class was helping to input the data and think about the survey. It's a great learning experience for the students because they can see in the real world how the data is collected, and then also thinking about what needs to be done with it, right? So it's not just this theoretical exercise. They can actually say, talking with Jamie, what are the needs of the community and how are these questions in the survey going to help that? And Jamie's always been super gracious with her time to take us on tours through the CID, which are fantastic for the students, to talk about the communities within the CID. And so the methods and stats class, the last few years, I think we've dropped the methods class just because I haven't been teaching it. And so the stats class is focused on it. And the way that looks is the stats students, as they're learning different types of analyses in the course, they're also then looking at the data that Jamie's been able to collect and think about how to present that back to the community. And then once again, Jamie's super gracious. She comes in and we actually do practice presentations. She looks at what we've done. She gives feedback and helps the students think through what the needs of the community are. And so it's a really fantastic partnership that we've had, and it's been hopefully it's been helpful to Jamie. I know that for us, it's been a fantastic experience for everyone.
Thank you. Actually, Jamie, you have something to add. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add really quickly that, you know, if it wasn't for this partnership, like there's no way that we could, as an organization, as a nonprofit organization, afford to like, you know, to get this done. And actually, you know, for us, I think it's really great that we are having to give constructive feedback to the students because it helps us like kind of think about it. Then we're not just like, all of us aren't just consuming it, we're actually digesting it and really like kind of working with the data. And so it's really been great for us in terms of being able to continue our work in a like sustainable way.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you both for those responses. I think something that would be helpful in this moment right now is just a little bit of an introduction to what is Seattle's Chinatown International District and what are the needs that have arisen over the years and like its whole historical like development. Jamie, can you speak on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So actually right behind me, my little Zoom drawing is of, this is actually where my office is. It's a drawing. It looks a little like a Simpsons-like thing, but it's cool, whatever. And this is actually given to us by some SU students through a different project that we're working on. So, you know, SU all around. So the CID has been around for over 100 years, the Chinatown ID. And I think it's actually, some say it's the third Chinatown in Seattle. The first one being down on the waterfront, the second one being in Pioneer Square, and this one being the third. But it's not just a Chinatown. It also has a Japantown, which was huge, like significant prior to the incarceration of Japanese Americans in the 1940s. And then it also has historic Manila-town. It now has a Little Saigon. And it's also just really kind of, you know, the home to immigrants that come to Seattle, many of which are coming from, you know, Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, you know, PI community. So it's a big hub for a lot of people that come to this country. And so yeah, like I said, we've been around for about 100 years. We've had threats of, you know, displacement and development. And because of that, we've been able to put some protections around the neighborhood with some really great historic buildings, but also cultural protections that really help it. What it looks like today is like, you know, it's a mixture of different businesses that come from across, you know, Asian communities. We have a Korean restaurant, we have Filipino restaurants, we have Chinese restaurants, we have Japanese restaurants, Vietnamese, but it also isn't just about the businesses. The businesses are what kind of you see when you come into the neighborhood, but it's also about the residents that live in these buildings, like this one. And so we have, you know, some of the highest concentrations of elderly in the city of Seattle, which means that we have quite a bit of elders that are not English speaking. Many of them can't use technology, which also means that, and many of them are on public assistance, which means we also have some of the highest concentrations of poverty in the city as well. And so we, but that's not, I think a lot of people think of the CID as just a place where old people live, but we also have families and we have young folks there. So it's really a really rich area. And it's kind of not only a place where you can, where I know, like, and I moved to Seattle as a child of immigrants and I was really missing, you know, my mom's cooking. I was able to go down to the CID and find ingredients and find the things that, you know, I recognize as coming from home, but it's also places where the businesses really are vibrant because of the residents that live in the neighborhood. And there's a symbiosis there. The residents go to these businesses because they have what they need. They speak the language that they speak. We have tons of social services in the neighborhood to really support the residents and the businesses are there. So it's very similar to other kind of quote unquote Chinatowns across the nation in that they're very close to downtown, generally close to transit because historically communities of colors get transit built into them. So we have almost 2 highways and a streetcar and buses and a light rail, and the ferry system's not very far away. So we're actually the largest transit hub west of the Mississippi and north of San Francisco. I know a lot of people don't know that. And it will only get bigger as Sound Transit continues to expand. So that's a little bit about that neighborhood. And so this is my favorite building. It's also where my office is. So
I did not know the offices were in the Bush Hotel. That's so cool.
Yes. Yes, I have a cool office.
Yeah.
We're in the basement, but it's okay.
One thing that I focused on in my research, for the folks here, I was actually a sociology student and I focused my research on community development in Seattle's Chinatown International District. One thing that I learned throughout the years is that a lot of the buildings in in the CID are residential hotels. And so, as Jamie said, a lot of these elders and families live above these hotels, but what you learn is it's like generational. There have been people all in these buildings for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I think that is something so unique here, and that it's just unlike anything else. And I think that's what makes Seattle's Chinatown International District super special. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, one thing that we actually talked about last week in our planning meeting is talking about how the students working in this partnership get to work in the community and with real data that impacts how Jamie, your organization can navigate its operations. Can y'all talk about more and the importance about working with real data and working in the community?
Yeah, I'll start. So like Will said, you know, I would normally in normal times have a tour that we would give to the students that would be working on our project. So generally at the beginning of the quarter, y'all would come down for I think your first or second class, and I'd be able to give a tour to the students. And it was really great because some of the data that they're working with are like things are happening at 12th and Jackson. Well, we wanted them to be able to see what 12th and Jackson looks like, and things are happening on King Street, or where on King Street. And so we really wanted to put a little bit more context to the data. And that to me, I think really, I hope it helped like the students not only they saw beyond just it being numbers and just being like what's on this piece of paper, but something a little bit more. And, you know, for me, it was really important for people to understand like what this work was going towards, and that the work that they were doing were going towards real things. So what they would do is, you know, send us a report, and we would take that report and make it into this, like, you know, you make it all policy and pretty, and we put into this document that we would eventually take to city council and say, these are the things that our community is saying about safety, and these are the things that we are concerned about, and how can you help our neighborhood, you know, be safer and give us resources. And so it was a really direct kind of result of the work, and I felt that was really important to see that like they weren't just learning something, they were just in the classroom, but they were doing something real outside of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I can't overstate the experience in any service learning project that you would do at the university. The things just click better, right? When you're reading a textbook and you're in the class, you're listening to a lecture, even in stats class, you know, they're working with real data. But it's not the same as knowing where that data came from and then having to present it back to someone in a narrative that makes sense. And so it's just, I think it just exponentially increases the learning experience, and also retaining the information too. Because if you have to stand in front of somebody and explain it, as opposed to maybe write an essay about it in a test or go through the motions to get an answer in the test, it's just not the same. I mean, before Jamie comes in to listen to their presentations and to get feedback, they have to do a practice presentation with me too. And students are nervous. And to me, that's a good thing. They need experience being able to explain what's going on, how they can apply what they're learning in class. And this is just, it's been something that the classes because we haven't been able to do it with every class over the last 5 years. And I do notice a difference with the learning outcomes for the students who aren't in the service learning class, which to me just says like, it just completely reinforces the importance of it. And I do want to say like, the importance also of going down in the community. The first couple of years, we were also, in addition to the survey, the students were doing a supplemental report just because the classes were so big, and they were looking at calls to 911 to see how, basically see who was calling, what they were calling for, what types of calls they were calling for, whether police were even showing up, how that matched with the survey data. And so that was something else too that was really important, because then the students also had to, so the idea was not just to go down once and tour with Jamie, but they would go down multiple times and spend time in the community and hang out and see what was going on. And also to see that it's not, you know, just restaurants, you know, as Jamie was saying, I'll just reinforce that point. It's an entire community, and there's so much going on. And working on these projects gives the students that exposure and that knowledge of, you know, understanding that these are extremely important communities, and there's a lot more going on than what they might have thought was going on. So.
Yeah, I definitely want to agree to what both of y'all are saying, is that in these lessons that they're learning in the classroom, context really changes the ways that students are able to frame different social justice issues, different issues in their community, different ways that they're able to even navigate their own community by learning that context and learning that history, and even learning about these issues that goes on in that y'all are focusing on in your work. One thing that I do want to highlight for the folks here is that these communities aren't even too far from SeattleU. They're probably in a 15-minute walking distance from the school. I go to the International District all the time to go grocery shopping and to just immerse myself back into the community that literally made me feel like home when I got to Seattle 4 years ago. So I think that's just wonderful that we are able to give opportunities to students that are just in walking distance of their classroom, and they're completely immersed in a new environment that they're learning about in classes. One thing we talked about last week too is also just bringing new narratives to the Chinatown International District, and how this work and just any form of community engagement within the International District changes the narratives. Jamie, you brought up last week that the CID definitely becomes more than just food and boba. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I guess the best way to do it is to kind of talk about my own experience with it. And I think also, just so you guys know, it's downhill from SU. I mean, you kind of have an issue and you need to go back, but to get there, you just walk downhill the whole way. So it's ways, which me going to SU is always like, I'm going to walk there. Okay. But when you guys come down, you can just like cruise on down the hill. So that's really nice. And those are the things you'll learn coming to Seattle. It's like what's uphill and what's downhill. It's really important to your to what you're going to carry and everything. Yeah. So, I really came, my first experience coming down to CID was in 2000 when I was in college. Just dated myself there. But I came down to go to eat dim sum at a restaurant that's no longer there, Top Gun. I don't know if Will remembers that restaurant. But and then I just kept coming. Generally, my family came to town and it was to eat. Like that's really the first reason why I came. And then when I was right out of college, I started volunteering down in the CID, and I realized, to me, it was like I had this slow realization of what the entire community was. And I was doing tutoring work with young, new to the country, high school age students. And so I was doing tutoring work with them. And then I started tutoring at the library. And then that's when I started getting nonprofits, and I started volunteering at different organizations, helping them do fundraisers. And I started to really understand that it was more like, you're young and you're just like, it's more than just, the restaurants and maybe even just the grandmas that you see, but it's about this community and these families. And then 7 years ago, I got this job and the world just popped wide open. And I realized, the CID probably has anywhere between, give or take, like 3,000 to 3,500 residents that live in the neighborhood. But on a given day, this is pre-pandemic, about 10,000 people come into the neighborhood a day. And that includes people that work in nonprofits, that includes folks that are in the businesses, and it's also like a huge transit. So people travel through the neighborhood all the time. So because it's probably what's seen as the kind of cultural hub for the API community in this Puget Sound region. But people travel from so many different places to come there, because a lot of people have memories of being, a younger kid there and things like that. And so when we talk about the community, it is this expansive, never-ending thing that there are people that have connections to the neighborhood in so many different ways. And I think that's what actually makes the neighborhood really special, but it's also what makes it completely multifaceted to work there and to really do work there. It requires many, many layers. And, I know the neighborhood well enough that if there is a shift in the sidewalk, I probably will notice it because I am down there so much. But it's almost like there is just so much going on there, but I don't know everything because I don't know everyone, and so so I think that is really important for people to see. And I remember one of the things a couple of years ago was advocating to get ballot boxes. So in Washington State, you vote by mail, and now we can just stick it in a ballot box. And even King County Elections didn't know how many residents live in the CID. And I stood there and I pointed at Hingham Park and I was like, all of these buildings that you see, there's people living upstairs, and the access to a ballot box is incredibly important. And we are one of the communities that has a low, voting rate. And that's something that I've had to even tell government officials that because they didn't know. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but.
No, it totally did. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It really reminds me of when I was also like, there are people living up there. You would be surrounded in Hinghey Park by all of these residential buildings that you just saw, like ground level. These are all restaurants and different shops. And then you look upstairs and you realize there are homes. And I think that's literally what we were talking about. There's generations worth of people who live in these buildings, and there's generations worth of history that lay within each of these shops and restaurants and these sidewalks. It's just really amazing how the CID has been able to go through all of those things and all of those changes throughout time. And yeah, it just shows how long-standing like Asian Americans have been in Seattle, and that relationship is very deep-rooted here. You know, I want to move on into our next question, which is like, how has the partnership shifted or pivoted during the pandemic? And I also want to add into that, how has even just the perspective of this partnership shifted amongst the increasing hate crimes against Asian Americans, and how is that influencing public safety and the ways that y'all navigate this partnership?
Yeah, so normally we do the survey in like January, February of the year, and we delayed it a little bit this year in January, February, when we didn't know what was about to happen, of 2020, because we had a shift in staffing. And so we were like, oh, we'll just wait till this person gets their feet wet and then we'll do the survey. And then March hit and we all know what happened. And so the survey did not happen until later in 2020, around October, when we finally like had a breath and were able to like pull resources together. And we ended up with the assistance of Will to redesign the survey to do it over the phone. And so in the past, we've handed it out paper-wise, but this year we ended up translating. So we had this whole like way to do the survey, and we translated into Vietnamese and Chinese, and we actually partnered with community partners, like 5 other organizations, and we all like kind of took groups of people and called them and did the survey on the phone. And it was fairly successful. Like many things in the pandemic, we had no idea what we were doing, and we just tried it anyway. And we were like, we'll see what happens at the end. And it ended up working well because I think we got over like 300 respondents to the survey. We also did it online as well. Will, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, yeah, I mean, this year was a little bit different. We haven't talked about next year, but I'm assuming, you know, I have 2 stats classes next year. I'm sure we'll be able to line everything up again like we have in the past. This year, because of the difference in the timeline, it was a little bit different, where I was able to just I ended up just doing the assistance with the analysis, which was easy because we've done it so many times. And I had prior work that was done by our students and that we had done together. So it was fairly easy a task to be able to help out, which is always great. Yeah, and then thinking about the changes. The other thing that I was going to say, and then I'll circle back to this, was just, you know, some of the things, I know we're talking about classwork with service learning, but as Jamie was saying, she started by volunteering. You know, that started like a real connection down in the CID. And so our students should think about that also. You don't have to wait for a service learning class to have exposure. You can work with the Center for Community Engagement. You can engage in volunteering experiences. And then when you end up in a service learning class, which I'm assuming, because we have so many of them, you'll have at least 1 or 2 during your course, no matter what your major is. You'll already be an expert in everything. And as far as the bias crime question, I'm going to let Jamie talk about it because she's much more into understanding what's going on right now in the CID about that.
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit how we've shifted during the pandemic. You know, I'd say, and then it'll kind of lead into what's been going on recently. We've really had to kind of be bold a little bit this year, and, you know, first of all, do things that we had no idea what we were doing. And sometimes I still think we're just like, okay, we'll try this, but also be very responsive to the community needs. And so Like just this morning, and we've been doing this for over a year now, I delivered groceries to a building in the CID, and we do 350 odd some bags of groceries a week that we drive from Mount Baker up to, drive from a food bank down south up to the CID. And it's really just trying to address some of the anxiety that a lot of our residents had when the pandemic first started, because they don't, they didn't really understand it. Some of it wasn't coming in language. Some of the stuff that was coming in language was maybe propaganda or wrong. And it was just a lot of confusion at the beginning. And especially our seniors were really afraid to go out. And the food bank in the neighborhood closed because it was a very tight, small space and it wasn't safe for volunteers. And so, things like that, we've had to really respond fast and and I think if anybody's read any political stuff about the pandemic, or not even political, but just like, disparities have been almost underlined and highlighted during this time. And so it was definitely something we saw on the CID. On top of that, we, because there was just less people coming down to the neighborhood, it got really quiet, and it got really kind of creepily quiet for a little bit there, but just kind of barren. And so I think a lot of folks, there was less eyes on the street, there was less people around after the uprising last summer. Unfortunately, some of the folks that were trying to disrupt the protests ended up causing some vandalism in the CID, and we ended up boarding up a lot of the storefronts. So like kind of these storefronts that are like shown right here, they were boarded up for a little bit. And so there was just kind of this feeling of anxiety in the neighborhood and this heightened sense of like isolation, but also awareness. And so kind of on to top on that, a lot of the stuff that's been happening recently around, anti-Asian violence has really, I think it's been really hard. And I think it's been hard not only to, for our seniors, because they still, again, it's like they don't understand what's going on and they don't really quite understand it. And to kind of backtrack a little bit, about a year ago, we were asked to apply for this grant to be a community reporter for hate and bias crimes. And so this was through King County, which is the county that Seattle sits in, and it's through the Office of Equity and Social Justice, through the executive's office. And this was really an initiative started and requested by community to have folks in community reporters, be the ones that report hate and bias crimes so that they can actually track it throughout the county. And so we've been doing this work for a year with a bunch of other partners. I think there's about 7 right now, and we're advocating for more funding so that we continue to do this work. But what would happen is someone witnesses a hate crime or just even even if it's just verbal, they can call one of us and they don't have to report it to law enforcement, because folks don't always feel comfortable doing that. But then also they're reporting it to a community member that they might know, or they might know somebody that knows them, or even just like, I talked to somebody yesterday, it was just nice. Like for her, she was like, I just want to talk to somebody about this, and it was just really, I understood that as an organization that's basically an institution in the CID, we've been around for 46 years, that it was important for us to kind of say, this is an issue that we know is happening in our community. And while we may not know exactly how to address it, this is one way that we can support this work. And we're still figuring out what that means. And right now, I would say that this work around, anti-Asian violence is something that it goes hand in hand with public safety. It goes, hand in hand with that. And like, what are the ways that we can support our community members? It's this reporting that we're doing. It's knowing that we're here as a resource. It's maybe even talking to them about different trainings that we can do to support, helping people feel empowered for themselves. And so that's some of the work that we're starting to do, and we're starting to have conversations around, but it's definitely something that is, it's really hard to figure out, especially, and it's exhausting, especially coming off of the pandemic, which is still happening still. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to share, like, that is extremely hard, especially in your identity and in our identities of being Asian American, and having to navigate this for folks who, have a lot of confusion around it. And we ourselves, like, also have to navigate that own system too. So thank you, Jamie, for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's really good work that you're doing. Yeah, I just want to give this time and space to like breathe, for these new students. It's a lot of information that y'all are taking in. it might be hard to even just like process all of it all at once. Just giving you some time to kind of think of any questions. Something that I heard come up out of what you were saying, Will, is this is just one of many opportunities to be involved with the community when you join SU. We actually at the center centralize all our volunteering opportunities that are outside of service learning courses in a website called GivePulse. GivePulse is a third-party website that the center uses, and our nonprofit organizations that SU partners with actually uploads all of the volunteer opportunities that they need onto that website. So you're able to even like see this by how many miles away is this organization from SU, and also you can categorize these orgs and these volunteering opportunities by different social justice issues via like humanitarian rights. If you're concerned about housing security and working with the houseless population in Seattle, you can also separate those opportunities by them. And yeah, right now I just want to invite, if y'all who are here have any questions that maybe linger in, maybe have come up around this. But if not, you know, we'll just give a couple of seconds just for that breathing and silent room to think. Yeah, well, if there are none, I do have one question for Jamie and Will, is kind of what does this partnership look like moving forward? I know you kind of briefly touched on it in that it's kind of unfolding, you know, as we do in a pandemic. These things have really taught us how to live day by day because of all the changes that we have in our own lives and in how an institution works and how organizations are able to like take on capacity work. Yeah, what does this look like for you, and what do you even like anticipate working on together in the future?
You want to go?
I'll start briefly, but Jamie will have a much better idea. Really what it comes down to is what the community needs. Jamie knows the types of resources we have to help, and whatever we can help with, you know, I personally am willing to provide that. For the criminal justice students specifically, you know, partnerships where they can see the evolution of public safety in Seattle, I think, is important. And understanding that public safety is about the entire community and the entire community working and having the resources it needs, and it's not just about law enforcement, right? And that's a very small, or should be a very small component to public safety in a community. And especially with our students, because we have students who want to work in the system, but then we have students who are advocating for abolition of the system. So we have a huge spectrum of students. And so it's really important for them to have those experiences to see how community safety and public safety should work well. And so if our students can get experience in that, from my perspective, that's a fantastic thing. As far as like the technical things and what Jamie needs, like whatever she needs, that if we have the resources to provide, you know, I'm always willing to do the work because I love partnering. So.
Yeah, I think I alluded to this in our planning conversation, but like that public safety, the bulk of the kind of administering the survey has like kind of left my body of work, I guess is the best way to describe it. It is with a partner of ours, and it's a decision that, you know, we as a community came to together. You know, this public safety work that we do, it's something that is a collaboration between a lot of different organizations across the neighborhood. It just happened to be housed with us for a little bit. Well, for a long bit, but up until now. And so, you know, I think that it's work that will continue to move forward. The survey is something that is wanted and needed throughout the community. I think that, so I anticipate that partnership, this very kind of, the exchange to be similar just with other people. But I do think that kind of moving forward, I'm hopeful and excited about some of the conversations that we're having. You know, our work has always been focused on, you know, how to do community safety that doesn't involve law enforcement, how to get more resources to the neighborhood, how to get folks to come and help our houseless population, you know, and really mental health resources and things like that. And that's some of the stuff that we want to really push for and expand so that the CID can see that. But I also think that some of the work that we're going to try to do around empowerment for our community, I think I see that as being some of the next steps that we are going to work on moving forward. And I'm not really sure how that's all going to play out and how it's all going to play together, but I think I'm hopeful that it'll be something that will help us move forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, both of y'all, for those responses. I think you answered it really well. One thing that I am thinking about amongst these responses is like, what are the current needs of the community? And also like, what are both of y'all doing in your own, like what's going on in the criminal justice department at the moment, and what's going on at SCIDpda? What are the things going on in the community so that students are kind of aware of the context of what's going on in SeattleU?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, like, I think a lot of my conversations in the last couple of weeks have been around anti-Asian violence work, whether it be folks reaching out with resources, money, or other resources on how to kind of help. I think one of the things that my organization is thinking about is that piece, how we support it, how we support our residents in a way that's meaningful to us and the resources that we have, knowing that none of us are, you know, maybe not an expert in this stuff, because who really is. But then, you know, I think we're also starting to look towards recovery because we are hoping it's very soon. And, you know, in thinking about what it's going to take for the Chinatown ID to recover both the businesses and the residents, you know, of folks losing their jobs, not being able to make rent, businesses struggling and things like that are some of the stuff that's on our horizon. And then right now we're kind of in the vaccine game a little bit, which is this like undertone of like panic that's also happening of like, first it was like, how do people get it? Who's, you know, and if anybody, I mean, I think it's similar across states, across the US, like regulations change like every week. And, you know, and so I think that's this like kind of constant chaos that has been happening the last couple of months that's like happening on top of the other work. And so I think a lot of that, you know, is starting to happen, but it's really, I think we're hopeful for recovery and that things will start changing and shifting.
Yeah, so with SU, obviously the criminal justice department, and you know, the murder of George Floyd last year and the trial convicting the offender. We have spent the last year and will continue into the future trying to figure out how we need to adapt our curriculum to make sure that we're providing everything that our students need to understand the historical context about the criminal justice system, the impact it has on marginalized and underrepresented communities. So right now we're going through the process of looking at our curriculum through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens to figure out, are we actually doing what we think that we're doing? And so we've had different types of sessions with students, listening sessions to kind of hear their perspective on their educational experience, what we might be missing and not providing them. You know, as I said, we have a huge range of students. You know, some people might say, why would someone who wants to abolish the criminal justice system get a criminal justice degree? But it's because of the knowledge that they gain, you know, in the class. And trying to figure out how to have those conversations in a really powerful, meaningful way, where students who want to work in the system and students who, you know, want to defund and abolish the system can have discussions about that and understand each other's perspectives. And so that's kind of what we're working on right now to make sure that we're providing that, you know, the best education that we can to our students. So.
Wow, thank you both of you for sharing that. And well, I didn't know that was going on. I mean, you know, in all departments on campus, I think students always get the chance to engage with curriculum that makes them more critical about their world and the society they live in. I think SU provides a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom on identity formation for students and what it means to even just be a student navigating the world, being a person and navigating the world. So I think what you were saying about students being able to engage in this and kind of see where they fit in the whole world of the public safety like system is really cool to hear. So thank you for sharing that. We are running just 10 minutes before this event is supposed to end. Is there anything that any of the students want to just plug in? Any questions? Or maybe for Professor Parkins and Jamie, do you guys have anything that you want to just highlight? One thing that I have been asking our community partners is, what is advice that you want to give to students when they do enter community engagement and when they do enter your org and when they do enter your neighborhood? What is something that you want to just give them pre-knowledge on?
So I'd echo what Dr. Parkin said about volunteering. I think that it's a great way to get to know a community, to get your feet wet. But I also think, I think people need to not be afraid to, like, if they start volunteering somewhere and maybe the tasks they're doing they don't really like, to be like, I don't like doing this, or I'm not thriving in this. You know, I think that's real. And like, we, as a person that works with volunteers all the time, we don't want you to be doing it if you don't like it. Like, you know, you're giving us your free time, and so we want to make sure it's something that, you know, there's like a mutual agreement on that. It's something you need, it's something you want to do. And I think that oftentimes folks feel afraid to say something or afraid to do it. So I think that that's the best part about learning what it is that you want to do. You know, when I was in school, I have an MSW from UW, and one of my internships was to do mental health counseling. And it is extremely hard and like deep work, and it was not for me. But now I know that because I was able to try it. And so I think also part of it is like trying what you're interested in, and like trying not to be too bummed out if it's not quite what you need to do or what is good for you. But I realized that in doing that, and now I know, you know, and so I think that's good to like, to try things out, to try something new, to try something that challenges you, and not being afraid to talk to your supervisor if like it's not working out for you.
Yeah, my advice kind of builds on that. You know, do things that are really uncomfortable for you. You know, go out of your, whatever your comfort zone is, because that's where you're going to learn, and that's where you're going to find things that you just had no idea that you're going to love and are awesome. You know, 4 years might seem like a lot of time wherever you end up, but 4 years is not a lot of time. And next thing you know, you're graduating and you haven't done the things that you wanted to do or had the experiences that you want to have. I mean, Seattle is a city that has stuff for everybody to do. You could spend the 4 years going to a different restaurant every week, or, you know, going to a different neighborhood. There's, you know, over 50 different distinct neighborhoods in Seattle. So there's lots of stuff. And also, people might argue with me about this, but I think in college, it might not seem like it once you start, but it's probably the most free, unstructured time you're ever going to have in your life. And take advantage of that. You know, if it's volunteering, if it's going on in other communities, you know, you're not having to have your 8 to 5 job or whatever you end up doing when you're done. And so take advantage of the free time that you have to go out and explore the community and do things that are uncomfortable and engage with other people. So.
Thanks both of y'all for sharing that. I think Professor Parkin, what you said about this is your free time, this is time for you to dive into things, is something that I've been stepping into, having just graduated last year and realizing that the world is just so big. And, you know, Jamie, what you were saying about volunteering and being parts of different things that you might not like or you don't know if you enjoy, one of the things that I did every year when it happened was the CID cleanup, the annual cleanup, that you get a free shirt and then you get to do a different thing
and a bagel.
Yes,
and a sandwich.
You meet at Hinkley Park and you get to see everyone who's volunteering there too. And I was always placed at the Danny Wu Garden to help with like changing the soil in the trails, or, you know, I had a community engagement class that did beautification in the Danny Wu Garden, and we partnered with Interim CDA, another nonprofit in the CID. And those things, you know, I was like, ugh, gardening, what? And then I soon realized that I love gardening and farming. And now I have my own plot in the Chardin Gardens.
Look at that.
Campus. Yeah, and I always visit the Danny Wu Garden knowing that I put the soil there.
That's right.
It's really fun, and it's another way, like what Professor Parkin was saying, you know, I didn't go through the school to get this volunteer opportunity. It was something that I sought out myself. I didn't do this for class credit or, you know, for just anything that the school required, but it was something that, you know, allowed me to be more deeply engaged with a community that's given back to me so much. Yeah. Anything that y'all would like to add? I know we're in the last final 5 minutes of this. Yeah. For the students here, I want to thank you again for taking some time today to be really intentional with the ways that you're moving and moving into Seattle and transitioning into SeattleU. One thing that I do want to highlight is that, you know, Jamie and Will talked about it, and also in our previous partners, you know, to just be outgoing and to be setting yourself into different settings that you're uncomfortable with. And honestly, I think this is one way that you are already doing that. Being a part of this Q&A to just even hear about what's going on in a neighborhood that is right next to your campus. I think that's one way that you're already being really bold by as a college student. So thank you for spending some time today to learn more about this. I think that already makes you a more informed student going into the campus. So again, I'll close this out right now so we can save us some time. It's 4 minutes left. Thank you, Jamie and Professor Parkin, for taking some time out of your day to answer these questions. It was really wonderful to hear more about the stories and the issues that goes on in the CID and the rich partnership that you two had together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks you folks. Congrats again on your new admissions into SU. And I really look forward to the time that we're all able to see each other. Thanks y'all in the chat. Yeah.
Thank you.